I was just reaching for a bag of carrots, mentally tallying the list of meals I could make for Andrew and our daughter Stephanie, when a voice slashed through the noise of the grocery store, sharp, familiar, and utterly unwelcome. Jennifer! My hand jerked. The bag slipped from my fingers and thudded onto the floor. My heart twisted painfully against my ribs as I slowly turned. And there she was. Dorothy, the girl who once knew all my secrets, the girl who buried a knife between my ribs and called it love. She grinned like we were still 12 years old, like she hadn't ripped the floor out from under my life. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Every wound I thought had scarred over split open, bleeding fresh. My hands trembled as I bent to pick up the carrots. Nothing good could come from her being back. I knew it in my bones. Dorothy and I had once been inseparable, sisters not by blood but by choice. We whispered our dreams into the night, swore to be each other's maid of honor, to rock each other's babies to sleep. And then, without warning, she crushed everything. It happened the night I introduced her to George, the man I believed I would marry. I was giddy with excitement, desperate for my two favorite people to love each other. I never saw it coming. Behind my back, Dorothy seduced him, got pregnant, ran away. No apology, no explanation, only silence. And a cold envelope of hush money her ashamed parents shoved into my shaking hands. She vanished, and I was left in the wreckage. Now, here she stood in aisle 7, bathed in the stale scent of onions and broken memories, smiling like we were catching up over coffee. "You're still tiny and cute, Jennifer," she laughed, loud and fake. I forced a brittle smile, fingers tightening around the bag of carrots until it crackled. "Where have you been all these years?" My voice came out sharp, colder than I intended. She shrugged, careless. "Here and there." Her parents had once nearly destroyed themselves searching for her, and Dorothy had treated it all like a minor inconvenience. Some people never change. When I got home, Andrew took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I collapsed onto the couch, shoes still on, groceries abandoned by the door. Stephanie patted over, resting her small hand on my knee. "Just tired," I lied, managing a weak smile. But that night, after Stephanie fell asleep, I told Andrew everything. His jaw clenched in that quiet, dangerous way it did when he was furious. He remembered Dorothy, the girl who mocked him in high school, who called him the boring guy with glasses, loud enough for everyone to hear. Neither of us wanted her anywhere near our family, but fate has a funny way of laughing at your plans. The next encounter came faster than I expected. A few days later, I was pushing Stephanie on the swings at the park when I saw Dorothy again, and she wasn't alone. Clinging to her arm was a girl who looked like she belonged in a magazine, flawless, delicate, and stiff, like she was posing for a photo she didn't want to be in. "This is my daughter, Cynthia," Dorothy said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Isn't she amazing?" I smiled politely, but my heart twisted. Cynthia's eyes didn't match her smile. They kept darting toward Dorothy, furtive, fearful. I knew that look. I had worn that look once too. Dorothy turned, flashing that same sharp-edged grin. "Still single, Jennifer?" she asked, voice dripping poison. Before I could answer, a bright, sweet voice cut through the park. "Mom!" Stephanie barreled into my arms, all sunshine and joy. Dorothy's mouth dropped open. "Is that Stephanie Smith, the child actress?" She gasped. I nodded, feeling pride warm my chest. Andrew jogged up a moment later, easy and self-assured. The look on Dorothy's face was pure, naked jealousy. "Andrew Smith? The actor?" she stammered. Andrew just smiled, cool and calm. "You know, Dorothy, if it weren't for people like you, I wouldn't be where I am today." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Dorothy had tried to break us. Instead, she forged us into something stronger. While she fumbled for a reply, Stephanie wandered over to Cynthia. "Why are you smiling like that?" Stephanie asked, voice soft. "You don't have to pretend." Cynthia flinched, then her whole face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Dorothy lunged toward her, snarling for her to stop crying, but Stephanie, brave as a lion, stepped between them like a tiny shield. I was already moving, scooping both girls into my arms. Dorothy reached out, furious, But Andrew caught her wrist, his voice cold and unmovable. That's enough. The mask Dorothy wore, perfect, pretty, untouchable, shattered right there in front of everyone. You always thought you were better than me, she screamed, voice cracking. Everyone liked you more, even though you weren't even prettier. People stopped. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. And still, she raged. Until finally, she crumpled to the ground, sobbing, broken. I stayed with Cynthia and Stephanie, whispering that they were safe, that it wasn't their fault, that they were loved. Cynthia clung to me like she never wanted to let go. No one's ever hugged me before, she whispered into my sweater. Tears blurred my vision. We stayed like that for a long time, safe, together, while the sky darkened around us. By nightfall, the footage had exploded online. Dorothy, the woman who cared more about appearances than people, was exposed for what she truly was. Later that night, Andrew told me he had suspected something from the moment I first ran into her again. Quietly, he had hired a private investigator, and what he found made my blood run cold. Dorothy had divorced George years ago, bled him dry, and dragged Cynthia through a nightmare built on lies and shattered dreams. She forced Cynthia into acting, not for the girl's dreams, but for the fame Dorothy could never have. Every fake smile, every nervous glance, every stiff little pose. It all made sense now. Dorothy hadn't just stolen my fiancé. She had stolen a child's childhood too. And now, finally, the truth was out. But somehow, deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished yet, not even close. Not long after the chaos faded, the phone rang, and when I picked up, my stomach twisted. It was Dorothy's father. His voice cracked with guilt as he stumbled through an apology, not for Dorothy this time, but for what he was about to ask. Could Cynthia stay with us for a while? The answer slipped from my lips without hesitation. Of course, yes. When Cynthia moved in, it felt like some secret door inside our lives had quietly swung open, one we hadn't even known we were missing. Stephanie was ecstatic, already plotting sleepovers and matching pajamas, while Cynthia remained cautious, drifting through the house like someone afraid the walls might collapse if she leaned too hard. But day by day, she grew steadier. Her smile, once so tentative, now cracked open more easily. Her laugh, soft at first, began to echo around our kitchen like sunlight. She helped set the table without being asked, scribbled through her homework with fierce focus, and even started swapping inside jokes with Stephanie. The pieces of our family, scattered and battered from old wounds, clicked together into something unexpected and extraordinary. One evening, as the girls huddled over their math books, Cynthia lifted her head. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of something long buried. I don't want to be a celebrity, she said, her fingers knotting in her lap. I want to be a lawyer. I want to help people the way you help me. The air shifted. Andrew squeezed my hand under the table. Stephanie beamed, announcing she'd be Cynthia's biggest fan. And me? I swallowed the lump in my throat and promised, right then, that she would never have to fight alone again. Watching her blossom felt like winning a battle we didn't even realize we'd been fighting. But not every ghost stays buried. One chilly afternoon, just as the first frost kissed the ground, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel, heart stuttering when I saw who stood on our doorstep. George. His face was lined with regret, eyes hollowed by years he couldn't undo. For a breathless second, fear prickled up my spine. Had Dorothy sent him? Was she lurking somewhere nearby? But George just lowered his head. I'm sorry, he said, voice hoarse. For everything. Not empty words this time. Real, broken honesty, the kind that comes only after you've lost too much. He confessed that Dorothy had poisoned everything, twisting truths, turning love into suspicion until he didn't know who to believe anymore. By the time he realized the truth, it was too late. Meanwhile, rumors about Dorothy crackled like wildfire. I overheard them at the grocery store in hurried whispers by the bakery counter. Loan sharks, betrayed friends, dangerous debts she couldn't outrun. No one knew exactly where she had gone. Some said she fled the state. Others murmured darker endings. For the first time in years, I didn't care. Dorothy's parents, on the other hand, showed up often, with open arms and tearful eyes. "You're saving her," they told us one evening, voice thick with gratitude. And watching Cynthia visit her grandmother, seeing laughter return to a woman who once seemed weighed down by sorrow, I realized they were right. At home, Cynthia threw herself into school with a hunger I'd rarely seen before. Notebooks and textbooks cluttered the kitchen table. Flashcards decorated the living room. Stephanie, ever the loudest cheerleader, popped up beside her with goofy chants and impromptu quiz sessions. One night, Stephanie slung an arm around Cynthia's shoulder and blurted, "You're the best sister ever." And for the first time, Cynthia didn't flinch. She just smiled. A real, brilliant, unstoppable smile that stole my breath away. It hit me then. We had built something beautiful out of brokenness. A home full of scraped knees and loud dinners, missed curfews and inside jokes. A messy, imperfect, completely perfect family. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder, what if Dorothy hadn't betrayed me? What if none of it had ever happened? But then I'd hear Cynthia and Stephanie giggling behind a closed door, planning adventures, dreaming aloud, and I'd know every heartbreak, every wrong turn, every tear. It led us exactly here. Tonight, like so many nights now, the front door bursts open with the familiar clatter of shoes and backpacks. "Mom, we're home!" Stephanie's voice rings out. Right behind her, Cynthia's laughter bubbles up, light and golden. "We brought snacks!" she calls. I wipe my hands dry and shout back, "Welcome home!" Because in this warm, noisy, beautifully imperfect house, we have everything we need, and no matter what tomorrow brings, we'll face it together. For the first time in a long, long time, I am complete. If you felt this story in your heart, tap like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Your story could be the light someone else needs, because here's the truth: healing is the real victory.